verse 13, he's talking to, no doubt, Brad, the liberty that God gave you for occasion to satisfy your flesh. And that's really what we think. Well, if I believe what you believe, I could live any way I want to. And Paul's saying, no, don't live any way you want to. You're not your own anymore. You've been bought with a price. So what's my duty now? My duty now is not to use my liberty for an occasion of the flesh to satisfy my flesh, but what? But by love serve one another. In other words, I'm no longer under the law, but I'm not doing it so that I can just go out, eat, drink, and be merry and satisfy my flesh. I'm set at liberty so that I could serve and love other people and pass the good news on to other people and be a blessing to other people and serve one another. So no longer am I serving my selfish desires. And so there's a lot of, probably a lot more we could cover in this than others. I wrote this down. The great fear of the legalist is that liberty will be used as an opportunity for the flesh. The idea is that people will go out and sin as they please. Then to say to a spineless God, oh, I'm sorry, forgive me, I shouldn't have done that, and then go doing whatever they want to do. And Paul recognized the danger of this attitude, and that's why he's warning them right here. He's warning them, don't have that attitude, I can live like I want to. That's not the purpose of liberty. And so here we're told not to. We're first told not to lose our freedom by turning back into slavery. That's the way the chapter started. Stand fast in the liberty. Don't lose the liberty. Don't be entangled again in that yoke of bondage is what we're told by going back into the slavery under the law. Then we're told not to use that to use our liberty by entering into slavery. Now that you're free, don't be entangled again into that. And now that you're free from that, don't go back into it and don't go forward into it. You see, what you find is, as long as I've been doing this, I've come to recognize there's a ditch on both sides. There's a ditch on both sides. And you can go back that way, you're going to fall in the ditch. But if you go too far that way, I can do anything I want. If you go too far that way, you're going to fall in the ditch. There's a ditch on both sides. So you should stay in the middle of the ditches. That'd be good practical advice for any Christian. Just stay out of the ditches. If you'll stay in the road, you'll travel far. If you get in the ditch, you ain't going to go far. Get in the ditch, you're not going to make much progression. And so that's the thing about it is that there's ditches on both sides. I see it all the time. I was just thinking about it on the way to church, and it had nothing to do with this. I was just thinking about a preacher I know who used to be the meanest. I mean, listen, he didn't even like his mama, man. I'm talking about a dude that, outside of breathing, it was wrong. And now I know the same guy who has gone way over here. And I've seen that so many times that when they leave this side, when they leave the bondage, when they get some freedom, when you give them the reins a little bit, they run way over yonder. And that shouldn't be either. And so what you'll find a lot of times when a guy rebounds, he goes way over here. You see somebody who's real loose over here, if they ever try to start tightening up, they may wind up way over yonder. Real strong. I mean, Amish or Quaker or a Mennonite or something way over there. And that's, I told somebody, I better not say that. But anyway, Lord helps me sometimes just keep my mouth shut. I found out one thing. I'm my own worst enemy. I get myself in more stuff than I should, saying stuff I shouldn't. So he's saying, don't go back over there. And don't go way over there. Don't use the liberty that you've been given. Don't get entangled again in the bondage. Just stand fast in the liberty. But don't use that same liberty that got you out of the bondage of the legalism as an excuse and a reason or occasion to just do anything you want to. And that's what we get accused of oftentimes, is that. And I believe here Paul sets up what seems like an apparent contradiction, but it's a warning. It's a warning. And if we ain't careful, we'll wind up messed up. And it'll be by our own doings. It'll be by our own doings. And I like what Charles Spurgeon said. I had to get this. Do not make license out of liberty. Remember that liberty from sin is not liberty to sin. That's good. Liberty from sin is not liberty to sin. And if you'll remember that, you'll do well, because you won't be so legal that it keeps you bound down, and you won't be so liberal that it keeps you bound down. You can travel well on the road if you stay out of the ditches. Legalism and liberalism. Or license. We'd say license. Like it's, when somebody says license, they're talking about like you got a license to sin. Think of it in that light. And so one guy says this right here. Charles Spurgeon said this, but you know that is often our tendency if we escape one error to rush into another. That's just exactly what I just said. It's our tendency if we escape one error to rush into another, to go from one error to the next error. And I had a great man that taught me this years ago, and it's the best lesson I've ever been taught. I repeat it often, and I'll never forget him setting me down in my church fellowship hall where I was young and dumb, and I didn't have good sense, and I was being heavily influenced by preachers because I wanted them to like me. That's where we get in a lot of trouble sometimes. Not following the Lord, but letting, like peer pressure. You think peer pressure don't make its way to churches and Christian fellowships and preachers' fellowships? It sure does. And so I wanted them guys to like me. And this guy set me down. He said, listen, I want to tell you something. He said, you have got to get balanced. I mean, balanced. And he told me, he said, an old teacher, something he read years ago, said, blessed are the balanced. And I never forget him setting me down and teaching me about being balanced. That is, don't go way over there and don't go way over there. Just get right in the middle. Listen, as long as the liberal people are cussing you, you're right where you ought to be. If the liberal people are cussing you and the legal people are cussing you, you're right where you ought to be. If that crowd way over yonder that thinks, outside of breathing it's wrong is cussing you and think you're liberal, and then the liberals think you're too legal, then you're right where you ought to be. If you don't fit in that crowd, you don't fit in that crowd. Just get right in the middle somewhere and be balanced. Just be balanced. And it was a great lesson I learned. But anyway, I like this right here. Because the context focuses on the way we treat one another, Paul has in mind using freedom in a way that tramples the toes of others. It is easy to think liberty is the right to sin or the privilege to do whatever evil my heart wants to do. Instead, this liberty is the Spirit-given desire and ability to do what we should do before God. This liberty is the desire and ability to do what we ought to do before God and for God and to God. And because of God, we ought to have a desire and ability. And so the bottom line is this: real, true, Bible-based, born-again, Bible-believing Christianity, Holy Ghost-filled, trying to live for the Lord is balanced in the fact that we want to please Him. It's our desire to do good for Him and to be grateful for what He's done in our life. And if we keep that desire, if we keep that attitude, it keeps us out of the ditches. It keeps us doing what we ought to be doing. And it's that desire. Now, if somebody says, well, I can live any way I want to, and if they can get away with it, I ain't saying Christians can't backslide. They can. I've done it. You can get backslid, or we could say backslid. That's not really a New Testament word. It would be out of fellowship in the New Testament. We get out of fellowship with God. You can get out of fellowship with God. But He will correct you. He will discipline you. And you can override it. And you can know you're wrong. But He will not let up on you. And it's kind of like, I don't know if I told you this about my cousin one time. My cousin had been on the run from the law for a long time. And he had been running. He had stabbed, I think he'd stabbed a security guard or something, or somewhere. Someplace he was robbing some stuff or something, wound up stabbing a security guard. Anyway, he had stayed on the run from the law for a long time. And they finally caught him. And I talked to him sometime after that, and he said, you know what? He said, I'm so glad they caught me. He said, I was so tired of running. He said, I was so tired. He said, that was the first real night's sleep I'd had in a long, long time. He said, I felt at ease that I could finally just lay down and nobody was after me. And I believe that's why the Bible said the way of a transgressor is hard. Because when you know right, and you've been taught right, and the Holy Spirit lives in you, and you go wrong, it's hard to go against that every day. It's hard to go against that. So it ain't our it ain't our job to judge people who's saved and who ain't saved. I think some of the best people that come to church pull their tie up tight, got their hair all fixed up, got on a smile, shaking hands, Sunday school, prayer rooms, this, that, and the other, probably going to die just as lost as somebody out here, with a guitar wrapped around their head, holding up devil horns, singing for the devil, shout at the devil. It don't matter. Saved, lost is lost, and the exterior has nothing to do with that. I think it'll show. But in some cases where people get away from the Lord, that's a rough life. You know who the most miserable people on this world are? It ain't the world. Most miserable people in this world are saved people that's living in the world. Those people are miserable. And I tried that little stunt. That's not fun. That's not fun at all. And run from that calling, but he said we're called unto liberty. And so anyway, in verse stand fast, don't be entangled again with that yoke of bondage. In verse 13 we have liberalism. Use not that liberty for occasion of the flesh. For an occasion to go out and do like you want to. Paul warns us against giving our flesh, our natural tendencies, an opportunity by abusing this freedom. And he warns us over and over again. And God's grace should never be used as an what was that? What? Keep going? All right. I thought the rapture took place and we was all still sitting here. God's grace should never be used as an excuse for sin. Yeah, but God loves me. Lord loves me anyway. I mean, I think, that ought to be engraved upon the door of a Baptist church somewhere, etched in stone. The grace of God is not an excuse to sin. Don't abuse it. Don't take advantage of it. I believe in grace. I believe in liberty. I don't believe everybody is on the same spiritual plane. I don't believe that. You know why? And one of the great problems I seen when I was in a more legalist, a more stricter sect of Baptist, one of the things I seen quick, real quick. And I don't think that's good. Because just like a baby has to grow up, I don't think yours... Listen, what I'm saying is, I don't think somebody could come in here, been out in the world. They was in the bar last weekend, and they love to honky-tonk, and they'd never been to church a day in their life, and they can cuss like a sailor, and they live like a devil, and they never been taught any Bible. Now, you ain't supposed to, and say it's a young lady, and she comes in here and gets saved on a Sunday morning. Or be further along than that. You can't expect that. You got to have grace. I've had guys come to my church with tattoos up to here. I mean, like here. I used to have a guy come to my church, a tattoo artist. The tattoos up to here, man. I'm talking about like, only thing wasn't tattoos his face, man. He had tattoos everywhere. And you know, I like the guy. I used to have a guy come to our church that was gay. Gay guy come to church. You don't want to run them out. You want to give them grace. You want to give them the liberty, the same liberty that you was given to grow. Occasionally, I think a few times we've had some same-sex couples come. I don't just blow them out. I want them to hear what we got to say. Now, we ain't going to put them in charge of the Sunday school department. You understand? We're not going to let them take over the youth group. But to let them sit and hear what we got to hear, we ought to give them that liberty to do so. And so don't be so legal that we get unloving. Do you see what he said? When we get in the right place, we're not way over there petting their sin, but we're also not way over there condemning their sin. We're right in the middle. We're loving them, but we're telling them the truth. That's balanced. That's balanced. And now preachers are so adamant about building a big church and a big congregation and keeping the bills paid and keeping all the money come in, they'll pet sin. They'll pet sin in order to keep a good crowd. And if you got to do that, you ought to just shut the doors. Ain't no church. Ain't no church. Community center. It ain't no church. A church will tell the truth. Now, they won't do it so mean as a junkyard dog that nobody can stand them, but they'll tell the truth. And if you're not preaching the gospel, then you're not a church. A church preaches the gospel. It's a group of believers that's come out of the world because they've been born again. They don't fit in the world anymore, and therefore they have come together to strengthen each other in this world that we live in, but they're still going to tell the truth because that's what fixed them. If that's what fixed you, that's what will fix somebody else. And so we got to be careful with how we go with certain issues and certain things. That flesh that he talks about, the flesh, that's that sinful nature. It refers to that fallen, Adamic nature. That's this flesh. That's what you see on the outside. That's not the real you. That's what's on the outside. And, you know, that's what lets us see each other. It's that old man, we call him. And you know what the flesh desires to do? The flesh desires to do whatever it wants to do. You ain't going to tell me what to do. That's the way this flesh is. That's why there ain't no more people at Bible study than what there are tonight. Because come in from work and they're tired. The flesh said, you don't need Bible study. You need rest. You need supper. You need this. And I understand people's got obligations. But you know why it's one of my favorite times tonight? Because in spite of all that, y'all got up and come. And you wanted to be here because you wanted something. Unless your wife made you come, and that's a whole different thing. I ain't going to point nobody out. But when you desire that, it makes the meeting good to me. Because I know how it is. My flesh is like that. You don't always feel like getting up and going. But your flesh don't ever want to go to church. It hates church. That's why at church at 12:10 you start sweating it. When the preacher starts lying and says, one more point, I'm about done. He's lying like a dog. Right in church. You know he's lying. He ain't more words I want to say. He got 15 more words to say. I mean, just 1/3 of what he's really going to do. And lying like a dog. But you ever notice that at church, man? About 12, a little after 12, boy, it gets rougher and rougher and rougher. But it don't when you're at the ball game or the movie. Y'all ever notice how long movies are now? Y'all remember when movies was about 90 minutes? I mean, that was average movies, 90 minutes. You know how long they are now? 2 hours. Almost all movies are 2 hours longer. You know why? Because we'll just sit and stare at that thing for 2 hours, and they know we will. But honest to God, you want to thin this crowd down? Let's have 2-hour Sunday morning church services to see what happens. You'll find out who's saved and who ain't, man. You'll find out who's got their flesh crucified and who don't. Because I'll promise you one thing. Ain't nobody but black folk going to go to church 2 hours on Sunday morning. White folk ain't doing it. And Pentecostals will. Pentecostals will. But Baptist folk ain't going to do it. But you know, it's really not you. You got a desire to come. You want to come to church. But the longer that thing goes on, the longer that flesh drags down, man, you get hungry and your stomach starts growling. And you think, man, I want to get out of here. And that's that flesh. You know why? Because it don't like it. Because if you're in the right place, that lets you know you're in the right church. Because it rejects the preaching. It rejects what it's around. It rejects everything. And so therefore it fights against it. So if your flesh is fighting against it, you ought to dig in the deeper, because you're whittling away at the desire of the flesh. And that's what the flesh wants to do. It wants to do what it wants to do. And you know, and there ain't no doubt one of the reasons Galatian Christians were attracted to the law is because they viewed the law as the only way to be able to deal with that flesh. They thought the law could fix the flesh and restrain it and control the passions and the desire of the flesh. And so later, look with me. If you don't believe that, look with me right here. I think it's in chapter 6. Oh, yes. Yes, skip over chapter 6. We'll get there. Look in chapter 6 right here. And verse 12. As many as desire to make a fair show in the flesh, they constrain you to be circumcised, only lest they should suffer persecution across Christ's sake. For neither they themselves who are circumcised keep the law. They're constraining you to keep the law, but guess what they don't do? They don't keep the law, but desire to have you circumcised, that they may what? Glory in your flesh. That they may glory in your flesh. And listen, you see preachers all the time like that. Listen, when they come out and say, we had 30 saved today, bless God, boy, God just used me in a great way. It starts lifting up themselves. That's flesh. Flesh wants glory. Flesh wants pat on the back. Flesh wants their name magnified and glorified. And come out and say, and boy, I have to watch this too. If we ever have a good day here and the church house is full, it's real easy to go out and just start bragging about that. Say, man, we had a church house full. God showed up. You have to be careful about that. Because all of a sudden, your head will start swelling up a little bit. Not like DJ done me on Facebook today, but swell up a little bit. You know what I mean? Now, you think about this. DJ's talking about how big my head was. Have you seen a head on him? You talking about my head? You talking about the pot pointing at the kettle now. Don't y'all agree? Talking about my head on Facebook, how big it was. That guy's head was 3 times as big as mine. It kind of looked like him. I don't know why he was sending it to me. But your head will start flaring. You know what that is? That's flesh. Flesh. And it don't matter if you go to church. Flesh is flesh at church. It's flesh is flesh at home. It's flesh is flesh on the job. Flesh is flesh. And flesh loves glory. And flesh wants to do what it wants to do. And so you've got to watch that. But he says, for occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. See, it's through love. It's by love that we serve one another. So all of a sudden our desires have changed. It's not about what I want. That's what the flesh is. But what's the Spirit do in us? It wants to see other people get saved. It wants to see other people get help. It wants to see other people living victory-filled lives. It wants us to see other people walking in the Spirit. It wants us to see good for other people. We got a desire to do for other people. And one of the things the world cannot say about the church is this, is that we might not always have it together. We're going to sin. We're going to make mistakes, and they're going to be broadcast, you can rest assured, all over TV. Preachers are going to have affairs. They're going to run off with their secretaries. I mean, the Sunday school teachers are going to leave with one of the deacons. It's going to happen, and it's going to get broadcast. But still, you look at Christianity as a whole, and we've handed out more meals. We've given away more clothes. We've done more hospital and medical stuff for free than any group of people in the world. We've tried to be a light to the world. And even though they don't like it, and you know why they don't like it? Because the spirits in them don't like the spirit that's in us. Jesus said they're going to hate you because they hate me. And I'm in you. And they ain't just that they hate you. If you'll cuss with them, drink with them, and fight with them, and act like they do, then they'll go right along with you. But when you go against that, it's convicting to them, and what's in you is different from what's in them, and so therefore they despise what's in you. And so we're to serve one another. And this is the antidote for using liberty as an occasion for the flesh. And what does the fallen flesh want? It expects others to conform to our desires. Make other people do what I want them to do. It cares little about others. Boss people around. Bully people into doing what I want to do. That's what the flesh does. But when we, through love, serve one another, that nature of the flesh is conquered. Because that's not what the flesh does. It don't seek out the other. When you're doing something and I believe that's why it says when we're going to stand in judgment before God, that God's going to try our works. They're going to be tried by fire. To see, Paul says, to see what sort it is. Or what sort it was. When we do a work, God's going to sort it out. He's going to sort out and see if we've done it because we wanted gratification for it. We done it for selfish reasons and motives. But God's going to find out what our motive was behind that. And if it wasn't for helping the kingdom of God, if it wasn't for serving others, if it wasn't out of unselfish motives, then God's going to say, that's wood, hay, and stubble, and it'll get burned up. But what we done for others and what we done solely for Him, not for our recognition, is what God is going to reward us for. And so, and by the way, do you remember what Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1? This know also that in the last days perilous times will come. Men, very first thing, perilous times will come. Men shall be lovers of their own selves. Covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers. I mean, listen, that's what Paul just starts out. He said, in the last days, perilous times coming. Men's going to be lovers of their own selves. And they're going to boast. And they're going to covet. They're going to brag. They're going to want stuff. They ain't going to nobody tell them what to do. They love their self. You ain't never seen no more lovers of self than what you see going on in this country right now. What I want, my desire, ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. They will one day. They're going to say, okay, hop in, big boy. Ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. All right, boys. Ain't nobody going to tell him what to do. Throw him off in there then. Because that's what happens to rebels. When they rebel against God, they rebel against His grace, rebel against His gospel, God's got nothing left to do with you. Because you've never been broken. And that's what happens when we get saved. Our will gets broken. Not my will, thy will be done. Not what I want to do, what you want to do. That's what Jesus taught us in His earthly ministry, is that it's about others. It's about reaching others and teaching others and being a blessing to others. And listen, that's why God left us here. He didn't leave us here so we could be live like the Amish and all huddle up in a community somewhere and hide from the world. He left us here so we could go down Home Depot to the job, and we could go to Burger King on the job, or we could go down here to the plant on the job and be a light for Him there. That's why God left us here. And so our time's winding up, ain't it? It's done, ain't it? It's done. I see it there. The word love here is, but by love, it's the word agape. And it's an unconditional, sacrificial love. Agape is. It's the love that God has for us. It's agape love. It's a divine love. It's a love that's not of this world. It's not like, hey, I love you, brother. It's not like that. It's not the love I have for my wife. It's an unconditional, sacrificial love that's given from God, for God, and or for us and to us from God, that teaches us to love one another the way God wants us to love one another. It enables us as His children to love. It's the love of choice, the love of serving with humility. That's the kind of love it is. It's the highest kind of love. It's the noblest kind of love and devotion. There's nothing like agape love. And we're going to stop there tonight. There's a lot of things we could get into it, but it's not just feelings. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of love. So I could sit here tonight and say, I love Brother Billy. I love Brother Billy, and I really do. I love Brother Billy. But I don't love Brother Billy like I love Leslie. Right? Me and her's got a different kind of love. And so I can love Brother Billy with a love. I can love my wife with a different kind of love. And that's more of a sensual love. I love her because she cooks good. I love her because she cleans good. I love her because she had 3 kids with me. It's a different kind of love. Now, you know, the love me and Leslie have is a whole lot different than the love me and Brother Billy have. Now, if me and Brother Billy had the kind of love me and Leslie had, y'all need to find another pastor. You know what I mean? That'd be a wrong kind of love. But see how love can be different? But the love that the Father has for us and the love that Jesus Christ brought to this world is different than the love me and Brother Billy have or the love me and my wife have. It's a love that is from heaven, that is a sacrificial love that is unconditional. It's beyond explanation. And that's what John was saying in 1 John 3:1. Behold, 1 John 3:1, behold what manner of love, behold what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us. And really, if you get down in the bottom of that thing, he said, hey, this is a love that's out of this world. It's just out of this world. It's amazing. All right, we're stopping. We're stopping. Well, we got one verse in tonight. Glory be. Do it.